18.
You got it from Zepto, is it?
Are you all on Zepto or Blinkit right now?
No, I'm on Swiggy actually.
What's happening in Bombay? I don't know. I live in Delhi.
You're in Bombay a lot, no?
I'm in Bombay every week, but I live home is Delhi.
I enjoy being in, I think, a couple of places instead of being in one.
But home for you is what you
Bangalore.
Yeah. Home is the place that you don't want to escape from, and I think it doesn't geography doesn't really define that, but the space that you feel the safest and most comfortable in, I guess that's.
Then home
That's
is
what-
time because
Yeah.
after a certain amount of
I know
time,
he's
you wanna
getting
escape.
philosophical now. Are you back in the gym? Nikhil?
Back in the gym.
Yeah. There's a 7-year difference between the two of you. That's a pretty a big gap. But you almost seem like the older one in this relationship. Am I right? Or
I mean, he is always in his podcast mode.
is this the serious phase?
I feel like people call us a startup, but 15
No,
years.
that's exactly what
Yeah.
that. Do you feel like a startup?
I'm going to be 40 years old soon. When all of this started, I was 22 or 20 or 18 or something like that.
How different is the belief system? And what are the differences? Now this is an interesting conversation to have.
You're quite good at this.
Huh? Quite good. What does that mean?
I said you're quite good at this.
I've been doing it for 24 years, a little bit longer than you have. Since he comes to you for grounding and centering, what have you sort of set boundaries in terms of what you should do or shouldn't do?
We have a lot of disagreements. We have fewer disagreements.
AI's expertise at your fingertips, or AI first, and so on and so forth. Today, as you look at your business as well as you look at the adjacent ecosystem, what do you make of it?
It's been commoditized to such a large extent. When anybody says we are powered by AI, you have to take it with a giant sack of salt because an 18-year-old teenager...
How giant?
Big. An 18-year-old teenager who's tech savvy can start using these things.
You've had a difficult 12 months, and what has been the mechanism to try and cope with this?
There's no answer to that. As in, the doctors said that it could be any one of the reasons, for the stroke.
Has it reshaped the way that you look at work, relationships?
Yeah, Nikhil has been trying very hard to get me and Seema to kind of socialize.
What baby steps does he need to take?
Nitin is on one extreme, Nikhil is on the other. He's a social animal. Maybe you can be social, but you don't have to be an animal.
That's the headline. That's the headline. Nikhil Kamath, social animal. For people who are starting up today, if I would ask you to share the 2 or 3 things that you believe are important.
Before you build something, first experience.
If we were born 15 years hence and we did the same thing, I don't think it would work.
What is the fear that you have today as you build Zerodha?
Regulations are something that we are afraid of.
At 17 crore demat accounts today, what do you believe that number is likely to be 5 or 10 years?
All these new accounts that are coming, in one bear market and they will go away.
You think so?
Yeah.
I wish there is that era in India like there once was in China, where we make the religion of the state for a decade, entrepreneurship. Everybody's allowed to try.
So is external validation important to you?
I'm surrounded by people who are saying shit to me all day long.
Number one question that everybody's asking, why don't you IPO?
As a listed company, there is so much you can say and there is so much you can't say.
14 years on, with the business that you've built, with the money that you're generating at this point in time, what do you see as the use of this?
I feel like we are still David in the story. We've been struggling for a long time to maybe get a banking license. We are subject to regulators who we don't really have any influence or access to. Their decisions can reduce our revenues by 50% in one day. They can make us shut down 6 months later.
Hello and welcome to Young Turks Reloaded. I'm Shireen Bhan. 22 years ago, the reason why we started Young Turks was to go on a journey to find first-generation entrepreneurs who were trying to use the very nascent internet business in India to create new categories or disrupt existing categories. The idea was to spot and identify the next emphasis of India. And today, it gives me great pleasure to have on the podcast with me three gentlemen who met by chance. Well, two of them actually met by chance. The third one happened to be connected by blood, but two of them met by chance and decided to start a company 14 years ago, which is today quite the shock and awe story across India's startup ecosystem, delivering 4,700 crore rupees in profit and 8,300 crore rupees in revenue. We're talking about Zerodha, and joining me on the podcast today, Nitin Kamath, Kailash Nad, and Nikhil Kamath. Thank you very, very much for joining us here on the podcast on Young Turks Reloaded. I'm going to start with you, Kailash, and that's because we've heard both of them more often than we have heard you. But there's another reason why I want to start with you, because Nikhil and Nitin, no, actually Nitin was at an offsite that we did, and he said that he considers you his life guru, and he believes that Zerodha is what it is because of you, essentially. And so I want to start by asking you, what do you think it was about Zerodha that clearly makes it, in many ways, a pattern breaker, an outlier in the context of how other companies around you were growing and building?
Definitely not one individual, but I would say the right people with the right mindset and the right philosophies who happen to meet at the right time in history. So that really is the reason why Zerodha has turned out to be.
Serendipity.
Absolutely, serendipity.
So take me back to that moment when the two of you met.
I mean, in fact, it happened right here on this road. I was in Bangalore in 2012, and it was my first time in Bangalore. And I was always a tinkerer, techie engineer, and a high school friend of mine who happened to be here, who happened to be in finance, had this idea to build a certain investment app. And I had no connection to finance, but I was an engineer and I always liked tinkering. So I joined him in attempting to build this. And we'd hang out right here, I think 2 minutes away on this road at his friend's place. And Nitin and Nikhil's first office happened to be across the road, I think 10 seconds from here.
So not much has changed.
We're still here.
And still together.
Yeah, and one day, I think Abid just walked in and said hi to Nitin, and we met, and that's how it happened.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that moment when the two of you got together. And I know that you went back and realized that there was no tech as far as the broking business was concerned. And that really was the problem that you tried to solve. And you know, going back to the question that I asked in terms of what makes you pattern breakers and what makes you outliers, one, just bootstrapping your way to success. B, a very clear focus on ensuring that you do things efficiently. And I was talking just before we started about the scarcity mindset. And I know that at CNBC, for instance, we've always operated with the mindset of doing more with less. And I want to go back to the start and there was no sort of napkin moment clearly, right. But what was it that you hoped to do with this company?
It kind of, different points, we were meant to do different things. Like when we started off, it was essentially saying, can we be better brokers for traders, very active trade traders. And around when Kailash joined, it was, we were kind of, dreaming a little bigger, saying we probably maybe have to go for investor audience and etc., which is a much larger crowd. So between 2014-15 until we launched Kite, with the launch of Kite, we were addressing like a much bigger audience. And 2016, this Aadhaar and etc. happened, 2016-17, and like what Kay was saying, it was the right moment as well. It is
right place, right time, with the right people.
Yeah, with the right people, of course.
Yeah.
So, and then, so the journey really began only 2015. The first 5 years was more like, for us, it was like learning. And 2020 COVID happened.
Yeah.
And then it was like really...
I mean, that was the breakout moment in many ways. The next big breakout moment for the business.
Correct, yeah. And during this journey, as in at different times, we wanted to be different things. As I said, first we were trying to be for active traders. Then we were trying to attract active investors. Then the Rain Matter, the incubator, we started investing in the startups who can build like adjoining niche platforms for people who trade on our side, and yeah, as in bootstrapping and all, it's just lucky. I mean, we were just lucky that the first 4-5 years we didn't have to go out and raise any capital, right? Otherwise, it's you have to go.
It wasn't an active choice.
It was not an active choice. It was really the only option. I mean, the VCs, etc., came into play only after 2015, because that's when they realized that.
But then it became an active choice.
Then it became an active choice, and then it became an active choice because now kind of realized that people who have who raise investments come with a certain baggage, and it's for us, without carrying that baggage, just the fact that if you have an investor, you have to give him an exit in 6 to 7 years or 8 years, that comes with the baggage. That means you have to grow, right? We have actually never chased growth. Like, not 1 year in the last 14 years have we ever gotten up and said, this is how much we have to grow. And that also makes us a little susceptible to, I mean, today we get asked why not list and why not IPO.
Yeah.
And there's no predictability in the business. In our.
So you've preempted. I was going to come to IPO in a bit. Since you've started that conversation, let me put that question to all three of you, because that is the number one question that everybody's asking.
Right.
Why don't you IPO in a market where everybody's IPOing at this point in time? Is it about the fact that you don't have clear line of sight as far as revenue predictability is concerned, especially in the current regulatory environment? 2, is it about the fact that, look, you don't have any exits to offer because you didn't want to carry that baggage with you? And 3, your freedom, the ability to want to do the things that you want to do without having to answer questions, which is it? And is it a no for now, or is it off the table, for us for the long term?
I mean, the only reason we would want to IPO is because we are at the forefront of this, right? As in, we are a stockbroker, and we ask every company to create wealth.
Exactly.
So that's the only reason. I mean, I don't think, at least for now, there is any other reason to go IPO, right? As in, if ever we decide in the next, by the time, I mean, the plan as of now is we build a bunch of businesses, build some diversification, and then maybe once there is predictability, then we can decide, right? As in, but then, even then, IPO or not IPO,
let me come to you, Nikhil. We're going to go back to your story in just a second, but let's do the IPO part first. And I was having a conversation with Samir Nigaman at PhonePe, and he said exactly this. He said, till I can look an investor in the eye and say, this is the line of sight I have as far as revenue and profitability is concerned, I'm not going to go IPO. And then I had a conversation with Yashish Daya at Policy Bazaar, and he said, one of the reasons why we considered IPOing was because in a regulated business, trust is a crucial currency. And when you're listed, it automatically sort of is a currency that you deal with. So when you consider the possibility, I don't know whether you'll do it 5 years from now or never, but what is the conversation in your head and amongst yourselves about IPOing?
Well, I think there are ways to argue both sides. There are pros to IPOing and there are negatives to IPOing. To your earlier example, can one argue that without IPOing, can a company be as compliant and follow regulation and build the kind of trust that a company which is public can? I think the answer is yes.
No, he wasn't saying it from the point of view of can we be compliant, but he was saying it from a point of view of for the retail investor, when you're listed, they see you as being a trusted entity because you're out there in the public markets.
I feel the contrary is true. As a listed company, there is so much you can say and there is so much you can't say. If you look at Zerodha and you look at Nitin tweets a lot about the numbers and predictability and stuff like that, I would argue that as a listed company, he can't go out on Twitter and say it looks bleak and profits are going down.
To say the best is perhaps behind us. I mean, that would have taken the stock down if you were actually listed.
So maybe there are other ways to build trust, which are not necessarily IPO. They're more nuanced in nature, but they're also more honest by virtue of that.
So if you had to vote, would you vote for an IPO in the near future or not?
I would be conflicted because the pros and cons, I think, are very close to being equal.
So it's what, 50-50 for you?
I would say 50-50, more leaning towards no IPO today.
More leaning towards no IPO, Kailash?
I would lean heavily towards no IPO, but then again, I'm not really a finance person.
Yeah.
To me, it's a bunch of common sense questions. Why does an organization IPO? If you want to raise capital, if you have a need for capital. Thankfully, we don't have a need for capital. And freedom and liberty is what really allows us to excel in what we do. And that's a big factor for me personally, the innovation that we do, the decisions that we take. So for me, unless, like Nikhil is saying, unless there's the pros and cons outweigh each other significantly, the flip, I'd heavily lean towards not.
Heavily lean towards not. Are you 50-50 or heavily leaning against not?
I mean, the only other reason, apart from the fact that we are stockbrokers, to list is if regulations ask us to list. Like, if SEBI says you're too big a broker to be not listed, then maybe not. Then maybe yes, we have to list. But otherwise, as of now, there's no need of money. So no.
No, clearly there's no need of money at this point in time. In fact, I guess the question is, what do you do with the money that you're generating, and that could potentially lead to some of the issues that we will talk about.